Huh, look at you. Where are you today? You're in a different world.
Unfortunately, hi, Frode. I was planning to not show my messy background, but it went a bit wrong here. I have some kind of masking effect. Uh, Let me solve this.
Fascinating.
Ah, yes. Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah, hang on. I was going to try the AI thing here. Just see. Uh, oh, God. Now suddenly it's all kinds of things. Oh, live captions. That was it. English, yeah. Okay. I think this is how it does the automatic captioning for us. Let's see if that works. Trying to write my last piece for the book.
Oh, nice. So we're getting very close now.
Yeah, the official publication will be next week, Monday.
Okay, nice.
So what I'm hoping to do is, yeah, I'll share it today with all of you. So if there's anything over the next few days, especially if you want to link something to something, then you have a few days to do that. Because I'm just going to put the chat here. Yeah, so on our website, the preview to download now is close to being the golden master, so to speak.
That's really good news.
It's taken a while, so see. This one I will actually try to spend some real time on promoting.
I have one question because I'm referring to one older future of text author, and I wasn't really sure how to sort of like link to future of text. Should that be is that an opportunity for visual meta to shine?
Yes, absolutely. And we're waiting here. So if you were on a Mac, it would be easy, obviously. But I'll just show you how it works. Oh, it opened on yours. It's
Cool.
not what I didn't want to open it. Well, okay, hang on. So I'll do it this way here. So for instance, just wait for this to be parsed. Here on the page 10, after the table of contents, whatever, there is a reading the book in Reader. Under there, we have future text 123. So if I click on the number, I get a little pop-up,
Uh-huh.
right? And you see it refers to it. So if I already have future of text 2, I just click and it opens future of text 2 if it's in my library instantly.
That is very cool.
And then if we look at a normal citation, let me see if we can find one earlier on. So it's something that you can do manually, or it's automatic if you use Reader and Author, but of course I can do it for you. So if you just tell me where, I can make that happen. And of course, one of the really fun things is in document links. Hi, Rob. Hi, Michael. So here we have blah, blah, blah. So you see this text here is the same font as a heading. So I click on that and it jumps to that article.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's just normal HTML stuff. Excuse me. That was a Freudian slip if ever there was one. That's just normal PDF stuff. So yeah, this is the overview like this. The way it looks now.
There we go.
Yeah, is there an obvious place for me to put in a link? I mean,
It's
by the
the
way,
next page. It's the
next
next page. It's I think it's let me see.
hi Mark.
If you just search on future of text, you will find it, I think.
So it's in here, okay. Yeah, if you can just send me that sentence from your
Yeah.
doc, because I've already done this. Any endnotes you have, I put them into links like this.
Great.
So they're live. Let me see what else. Yes. Okay, so hello everyone. Where'd you go? There you are. Hello, Bill. Oh, you're muted. Classic. So today we have transcripts going on, live transcripts. Can you all see it? No or yes?
Yeah,
No.
I can see it. You have
Not all of you.
show captions. Yeah.
But that's
Oh,
okay because I can see them. And the point is, after the session, I'm going to give this to an AI to try to make a summary out of.
Good morning, everybody.
here we
Good
go.
morning.
Did you ever
Morning,
try the
Hey,
AI
Bill,
comment
why? How's everything in
Yes.
Mexico?
It's cold.
Cold in Mexico.
Yes.
We believe you. We believe you.
Some
Didi,
people are
I was just saying, I've turned on the Zoom live transcript, which has been improved now with all kinds of stuff. Apparently, at the end of the session, this will give me a proper transcript where everybody is named, which is the huge problem when doing it with another system, having to manually say who said what. So then I'll try to clean that up with some AI. So that's just a little neat thing for everyone to be aware of.
It's working.
Yeah, it's pretty good. And
How do
also,
I see it? I'm sorry, I can't see it.
don't worry, at the bottom of the screen,
Uh-huh.
somewhere, actually, can someone else try to help? Because since I'm hosting, I may see it differently.
It's under captions, hide captions, show captions.
Captions.
Show captions. Okay. Record and reactions.
Yeah, I'll just throw some text, some comment in. Yes, it seems to be
Okay.
picking me up. Yes, presumably it's going by the microphone.
Bill Bly said, okay.
Excellent.
And
Then I have a question.
B-L-I-G-H.
Michael, did you submit something to the book or not? I don't want to have missed you if you did, but there's no pressure if you don't.
Not yet. I put on some notes, but I didn't put it in prose yet.
You
Is there
have
a deadline?
till end of tomorrow.
Ah, interesting.
Book is going to be published next week, Monday.
Right. End of
Bill,
tomorrow.
sorry, Mark has a
It just very quickly. I realised that since I sent something in, I mean, I sent it to you in author. I'll have a reread of it just in case there shouldn't be any errors. But presumably, if I just send you another author doc, is that sort of simple for you to use? Okay, cool.
Yeah,
I want a bit more time then. Yep.
It should be. And if you go to the website, I'll give you the link again here in the chat. Well, of course, you all have it. But the current version there is one that Jonathan Finn has gone through and copy edited. So that's better than it's been before. And I think we're almost ready. Michael, if you submit something tomorrow, that would be great. I still have an article I'm trying to edit myself, which may not make it. So, there we go. Bill, you are new, so 2 questions.
Yes.
One, if you'd like to introduce yourself, and we're also happy to introduce ourselves, but also, would you like to put a piece in the book, The Future of Text Volume 4?
I don't think I have anything ready enough for next week, but yes, I'm Bill Bly. I live in Mexico, and I am 7,000 feet up in the mountains, which is why it's so cold.
Ah, okay.
And I am a hypertext author. I just published a book, thanks to Dini Grigar, last month, and I am already deeply at work on another one.
Fantastic. If you put a link in the chat
Oh,
here.
yes. What a good idea. Mm.
Can I say something about his books? I want to brag about him a little bit.
Oh, Dini, what a sweetheart.
I've known Bill forever, and his life's work is this beautiful novel called We Descend. And I've written about this many times in the Traversals book that I've published with MIT Press with Stuart Moulthrop. I did a whole chapter on this, like 50 pages, doing a textual analysis of this piece. It came out on CD-ROM back in 97, I think was the year the CD-ROM
That's right.
came. And on Story Space software. Later, he developed a 2nd and 3rd edition on Tinderbox. Many of you know that those are Mark Bernstein's platforms. Anyway, we took all 3 editions, the lab did, and combined it into the complete edition for open web access. Built it in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So it's a reconstruction of the original work plus 2 other editions that go with that work in one place. And it's an incredibly beautiful novel. The aesthetic of the novel is fantastic, and we've worked really hard to match the aesthetic with the design. Because one of the problems we have with platforms, as many of you know, the platforms don't always match the feel, the tone, the mood, the experience we want the user to have, the reader to have with the text. And in this time we're living in today, StorySpace just lacks that, as does many other platforms. And so producing this in open web languages gave us the ability to do a lot of work with the aesthetic for UX UI to make it quite beautiful. And I think it gives you an idea of what the lab produces in terms of quality, documents, works. And we hope to have that kind of feel with the projects we have moving forward as well. So anyway, beautiful work. We worked really hard with Bill to try to match the beauty of his words. We're hoping to do the same thing with Rob Sweigert's game, because that's what we're doing currently. So we'll be done by 3 weeks. That one.
Yes. Thank you, Dini. Absolutely agree with everything you said. Thank you so much.
I'm looking at the link now.
That's the Pathway link. That's not the work, Bill.
Yeah, sorry, I put that in. It's just I thought it might fill in for people in the meantime. But
Okay.
I can pull it up. Hang on a second.
Yeah, if you would. I'm having trouble getting back to the
Give me just a second.
Mark.
It's coming. It's coming.
I'm gonna have to join the meeting again.
There you go. All right, it's coming in. Here it is.
Thank you.
The novel is built on the notion of archiving, which means you're digging down. It's like excavating. It's archaeology. And we wanted to give that sense by having overlay. One of the things I liked about the novel is on the StorySpace platform, as you opened up each of the lexias, it went on top of the other lexias, right? So eventually you were building this kind of scaffold system where the first thing you hit was at the very bottom. And Bill didn't like that kind of reading because that meant you were simply just not doing the hypertext experience. You're mostly doing just kind of the wave of return, as Michael Joyce called it.
Yeah.
We didn't want to lose that excavation feel. So we made that map that allowed you to do that descending and ascending, which I thought was really part of what the novel was all about, from my personal experience and perspective as a critic.
Yes.
My lab has a designer, Holly Slocum, who's probably the best fucking designer I've ever worked with. And many of you don't know this. I owned a design company for many years in Dallas, Texas. And I worked with many designers. We did work for Neiman Marcus, Bloomingdale, some big companies. And I worked with many beautiful designers back then. But Holly is the best I've ever worked with. And I'm lucky to have her in the lab. She's my project manager, and she's also my senior designer.
Yeah, very nice.
And then I have excellent coders. I've got folks that specialize in programming languages, and I have coder types, so HTML folks. But luckily, Bill gave us all the HTML and CSS. We just had to JavaScript.
Yeah, you just had to make it look nice. It's just so beautiful, the way it is now, and I'm very grateful. I have indeed been working on this for a long time. Thank you.
Well, the cool thing about this as a scholar, because when I was doing this, the chapter for traversals, I had to go through that piece so many times and I was actually counting how many times a certain word would show up. I did the same thing for the Odyssey when I did my dissertation before there was software programs to help me. So I'm really good at counting words, right? And what we built in for the search mode was the ability for a scholar to say, how many times was this used? And it gives you not only how many times, but everywhere in the text it shows up. And that's so helpful. So it's really, really helpful for scholars who are trying to do a textual analysis of these early works. Yeah, thank you. We're trying to, Leon, what I was trying to build from the vision that we have in the lab is what a book ought to look like in the 21st century. Like, what should a book, electronic book, do in today's world? What do readers want to experience? And the first thing is a search. They want to be able to just kind of go to things they want to find. And then we also want the medium to match the message, which is what books don't always do, right? You have a book and you have words on it. I just finished a novel last night that it was on an iBook, for Apple. And it's no fun to read that kind of book, but to have something that actually, the medium actually matches the words is quite amazing. So anyway, so really interested in that kind of work in the lab. So how do we make electronic literature stand out, not only as literary works, but as literary object, long-term access?
I like the starting interstitial too, because it's sort of been pertinent to, some of you know, I've been taking some old ACM papers and putting them into Gabo's Minter system, which has been interesting. So you're taking stuff that was basically old-fashioned print work and sticking it into something that broadly is a block, i.e. paragraph level addressing chat system. And it turns out the two just don't work. Because one assumes, the latter assumes a fixed hierarchy, and actually text designed to be read off the page is actually much more fluid. I mean, we fill in the gaps where, for instance, where you dive up and down the outline. So, section 1.1 might completely wrap section 1.1.1. Software outlines struggle with that, because the nesting all goes to God. So it's actually really interesting. But when I saw the thing come up, when I just looked at the, so it says, is this your sort of first reading? I thought, Yeah, actually, that's a really useful metaphor. I think we should, because as we now have more digitally native documents, and we're no longer compelled to the rigor of a printed page. We don't have to show the same person, or indeed, I may use the same document in different ways. I might want a different render of it. I don't really need the artistic render, except when I want the artistic experience. I'm not thinking so much of Bill's work now. I'm actually thinking of just quotidian, just reading academic papers and things, but you're doing a different thing. You want a different interaction with the text. So it's a really interesting idea there of having a sort of some affordances. And it ties across to what we're thinking about with XR as well. So when you go in there, one of the things you might want to sort of indicate or have asked of you is, well, what this thing you've asked for, how do you want to see it? What are you going to be doing with it? Do you literally want a render of the text as it might be on a bit of paper, or do you want something more useful?
Let me say this, and then Leon has a question. I come from textual studies. I've worked my dissertation was on Homer's Odyssey, ancient Greek, right? So I worked with oral texts and was real interested in the way they became expressed as written text, or in the case of my dissertation, art, opera. The Odyssey is opera. The Odyssey is, ballet, which I have 356 different versions, different iterations of the Odyssey over the Middle Ages to the present. So the book is interesting because we didn't expect the book to do anything. We wanted we wanted the words of the author to stand out. And the book was meant to be like the white box, right, of a performance space, of the curatorial space. And the words stand out, right? With electronic media, as I studied it under Nancy Kaplan, that's not how we expect the electronic medium to perform. We want the medium to match the words. And in the early days, we had so little tools to be able to do this readily. And I think we've gotten to the point where we can do better. And that's the kind of the argument we're using in the lab, is we can do better now. Leon?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm really impressed. I really like it. I also like the fact that you can just link or share a chapter with a friend, because it could come up during a conversation, and then you can basically say, well, read the whole book. It's awesome. So my real question is actually, how does this creative process go? If you have the text, you have the information, and the writer of the text, a Bill or a Rob, how do you go about that? Like, I mean, you're going for a unique experience outside of or beyond a book. How do you sort of get to this vision of how the experience should be?
Rob, you go ahead.
I'm discovering that there are more ways to interact with text than I was able to imagine 40 years ago. But obviously you're getting involved in your gestures and the ways in which you move your hands. I'm expecting that eventually our facial expressions may cause trigger some kind of reaction from the text you're examining. We're associating it with all kinds of other media like sound and motion. And Frode's put a lot of different ways of coloring text that brings out different things. I just think that this is we're about to have a golden age of dealing with text in ways that we haven't envisioned before. Yeah, it's going to be parsed in many different ways.
Can I mention something about that to Leon? In response to that, we work closely with the authors. We're lucky that the authors we work with are living authors. In the case of Thomas Dish, we redid the Amnesia game that he produced in 1986 for EA. He was not alive, but we worked with his estate and rebuilt that site for open web. Everything we do in the lab is open web, all like open access, no proprietary software. And so working with the author has been very helpful. We worked very closely with Bill on this. At the same time, we're very careful about who we work with. We want to be able to interpret the work for a contemporary audience. And I'm a scholar of these works. I mean, this has been my life for 30 damn years. This is all I've done is electronic literature, essentially, for 30 years of my career. And so I know these works well. Or if I didn't know them well, I got to know them very quickly. I had not played Portal until I met Rob. But I knew Bill Bly's work since 97. And so it helps to have that kind of background and that understanding of hypertext art, which is different, I think, in some cases than hypertext science. And so, yeah, and we work closely with Bill on this, and we're working with Rob, and Rob has given us a lot of freedom. We're not reconstructing Portal, we're adapting it for XR, which is very different than what we did for Bill. Frode?
Just want to spark up a little bit on the classical discussion between Mark and me, because sometimes it seems to me that Mark has this notion that, because you use the artistic aspect of reading, Mark. So I feel very strongly that text is not just linear strings. I think layout is absolutely a core part of the expression of what text is. Now, of course, I'm saying I'm sparking off you, Mark. I'm not just disagreeing. Because in many cases, you do need to get rid of all that, for parsing, for analysis and all sorts of things. And of course, if you want to read a novel on your watch, you need to change the layout a little bit to be extreme. But I think it's a really worthwhile point that you're all talking about, because we can imagine being really, really strict about this. I think someone in the community has brought up the idea of, if you're reading a 500-year-old text, should you be maybe reading it in the room where it was normally read? And of course, this is the kind of stuff XR can make happen. Of course, you won't have the textures, there won't be the smells, a lot of things will be missing. So to have this whole notion of the underlying text, so to speak, its intention at the time, and then also experiences for different times and audiences, I think is really, really important to keep in mind, both aesthetically and connectively, such as glossaries. A glossary created with the work will necessarily have its meaning change over time as language changes. So then it becomes a really fun and interesting exercise to, how do you keep the original glossary as a gloss? Do you annotate it with new words? And if so, how do you do that? And I also think that for what you guys are doing, Dini, what you're making here with Bill and with Rob, the kind of interactions that you're enabling to capture that now in the web as you've done is so important. Because in 100 years, all of this will be outmoded, just like paper is today. So outmoded, but also still relevant. So for people in the future to be able to go back and, once you have all these haptic interfaces and all these things, to read in the manner intended now will be incredibly valuable, because it will represent an entirely different mindset. So it's all metadata, basically.
I'll just quickly clarify what otherwise might have seemed like a sort of throwaway comment, and this isn't to disagree with anything Fraser just said, is that I think what I was driving at, perhaps a good example is something like a cookery book. Now, a nice cookery book, someone has spent a lot of time making it look very nice. And it makes a nice work of art, often in a way that doesn't make it very useful as a cookery book when you're trying to cook. And I suppose that's a distinction I'm really drawing at. And obviously now we have digitally native documents. As it were, this original design is still something important and something we want to have, but we have potentially we don't have only that. You know, I mean, I suppose I could take the cookery book, scan all the pages, take the text and do stuff with it, but that's a lot of work. Essentially now we have the choice at outset, because most documents are now digitally native. I mean, I think that's a really interesting thing that's really coming to me now. Actually, and in really good news, I just think I've just discovered that the ACM has taken the 2-column format out the back and shot it at last with their latest update that's just come out to their formatting.
We're going to have one column.
It looks like it. I mean, I think people are accepting the fact that, you know, apart from the fact that many of us are very used to it, and sort of, you know, there's a slight Stockholm syndrome. Well, if you're used to it, it seems good. But actually, you know, it was there to save paper cost and print cost. And it doesn't actually help any of the things we're trying to do now, apart from introduce more typesetting sort of artifacts that you then have to remove if you want to actually use the text. So actually, I think it's actually a positive thing, and it will help in well, some of the stuff we're doing, you know, for helping authors who just want to submit to a journal. But yeah, that's news, breaking news as of today.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, just following the hands. Michael.
That's really interesting to know. Following the discussion and with the transcription and AI summary going on later, my mind was wandering a little bit about the metaphor of zooming text that I quickly wanted to share with you. I'm currently writing on my dissertation, which is by publication. So I'm writing parts that summarize. So it's chapters of my dissertation that summarize publications, these 30 pages into 2-page summary. And then later there is a summary of that chapter, and then there's a summary of that dissertation and all that redundancy bullshit. And I just wondered, what if it could be an automatic feature through AI tools where I can, like a pinch gesture, zoom in and out of text and have different levels of density in it? How nice would it be to zoom exactly in the length and detail of the text that I wanna get into? And I can already see that people tell me this has been invented dozens of times.
Okay, I can comment on that from the experience of our own book. So for volume 3, I took about half the book, and I made a, you know, I'll actually show you because it's such a relevant point to this. So I'll just go to the library. Oh, I don't think I have it here anymore, actually. Yeah, here we go, AI edition. Should open immediately, except Apple likes to do funny things. Okay, so this is how, this just explains it, but this is how we're trying, this is a very mechanical way of doing it, but all the articles, many of them were many, many pages long, right? So here on the left, we have an AI summary. And on the right, we have the actual first page of that article only. Because one of the useful things that Fabien did a while ago, he made us experiment with putting lots of pages on a wall. And if you have a full first page, you get a good indication. So our experience from this is that if you compare these 2 pages, this AI, it's okay. It was actually shockingly good, but it's still only okay. But to be able to get a sense of the article, you kind of want to see the author's own words. At least that's how developed to me. So that's why the notion of AI summaries, whether bullet points or not, the act of reading them is always filled with a mental layer of questioning if it's bullshit. Right? Is it really reflecting it? That's something that, you know, when it comes to the transcript today, we're going to have an AI summary and it's going to be good enough. But a written piece by an author is something very, very different. And, you know, so that's why it was fun to do this. And here you can see an example of Barbara had a huge article, and this is what it went. So we do have a kind of a mechanism for yeah, okay, I'll just open this one. We do have a kind of a zooming mechanism for our book right now. And the way it goes is this. You can fold the book into a table of contents like this. So we've spent a lot of design time on the name versus the title, so that even though they're not in two separate columns, it's quite skimmable. I'm sure it could be better, but that's the effort behind it. So once you get to that, you have that. And from what we've learned in the experiments, we now have two different ways to navigate. If you do arrow right as normal, it'll go one page at a time. But if you go arrow down, it'll go to the next article. So that means that that in itself gives you kind of the front page view zoom of that article. So let's say I want to read this. No, I don't. Change my mind. Skip to the next one. Actually, I go back and now go through it page by page. It becomes a kind of a zoom. So absolutely a worthwhile thing to experiment with and to discuss. I just wanted to show you our own experience from the book on this. We need to, something definitely worth going further with. Hands disappeared. Did I talk things out of your heads? That's not good. I think, Rob, I saw your hand. What happened?
I don't know, disappeared. I had a couple of thoughts, and they may be related or not. I'm going back to Ezra Pound and imagism and the idea that words put together have a kind of resonance between them that's different from each of the individual words. And another way of interacting with text is by creating different kinds of combinations between what I guess we call lexia, or I call nits, narrative units. That creates a third dimension of how text works from the individual word. And I think Auden said, you know, if you're interested in putting two words together and seeing how they clang together and create something new, then you're moving towards poetry and away from journalism. That reminded me of what Jeff Kripal, a religion writer, calls the library angel. And a lot of text that, you know, collides at random even can suggest new combinations that you wouldn't have thought of if you hadn't sort of randomized stuff, or, you know, wandered through, like going to the library and looking for a specific book. You see a lot of other books, and that sometimes leads you in a new direction. And I just think it's really important to make sure that text stays as flexible and fluid as possible, so that you can swim in it rather than treading on it.
And that's why I called my philosophy lecture information. So thank you. We're on the same wavelength. I'm just going to show you one more thing. And then Fabian, you posted a few things I would really like you to comment on. Because another thing that I've found in this exploration with our book, you can see the screen, right? Is that what you want to see differs from person to person. Of course, we're going to get AI agents which will help us with this over time. But for instance, one of the keyboard shortcuts we have is this, where you have custom keyboard shortcuts that you make yourself. And for instance, here, this is the default set. AR, VR stuff is red, AI orange, PDF, because it's important to this work, is light green, art, and so on is green, etc., etc. You change that. So when you go into this view, you can get a color glance of what all the articles are about. That's automatically extracted. You can also do another view where you see all the names that are mentioned. I thought this would be very useful. It just isn't. And it took us forever to do things with parsing for this. One of the things is the table of contents was parsed. That's an important thing to leave out, because you're going to have a lot of names on the table of contents. And the top part of the screen is one of the most valuable for our eyes. So we spend a lot of time removing crud from the top of the screen. And one of the very recent things is we made sure there's always space at the top so you can visually see you're at the top. And then finally, we have another view which shows all the glossary terms in every section. I find that one quite useful because glossary means that the author or editor finds these terms very pertinent. So that's why for this document they are relevant. Like Apple isn't mentioned that many times, but here Apple is mentioned, for instance. Yeah, so thanks for whoops. I thought I kicked you all off. That was horrible. Yeah, so thanks for that. And Fabienne, would you like to show, maybe screen share your semantic zooming tweet? Because that's really, really cool.
Yep, sure. If screen sharing works, because I had little problem with that in the past.
Well, how about I share your screen and you talk?
I mean, you share your screen. I don't think you can share my screen.
Of course I can. I am a spy. I just mean share your tweet.
Yes, yes. Thank you. So yes, I mean, we had discussions also in the past in terms of semantic zooming. So you have the content, let's say a full document, in a way that might not be interpretable if you just have the whole thing, all the pages in front of your face. So maybe you want the title or the cover. And you can, of course, zoom by seeing or getting closer to it, but you might want to adapt. And I think that's how I interpreted what you suggested, Michael, that when you zoom closer, you'll have a shorter or longer paragraph, but it's not the initial paragraph. It's like either a summarization of it, of a variable length. Maybe it's one line or a paragraph of 10 lines or 50 lines or whatever, or a summary per per topic or per section, let's say. One of the way I did it before LLMs, so a couple of years ago, was I have my wiki. One of my goals is to put the wiki in XR so that I can manipulate the pages or as documents. And so you can see on the right the highest level, which is basically just the graph. You have the dots with the different colors. A color represents a type of document manually annotated. Let's say it's everything related to programming language, everything related to natural languages, etc. And the links are how, if you have a link between the two pages, basically. So that's the highest level. You just have a kind of blob, a shape. And if you zoom in at the furthest, you can see the actual page. But otherwise, you see here the link between pages with just a group, so not all pages. And the little widget, the level, you can then adjust the level, like how many pages you can see. And as you zoom closer, they are represented differently. Does it make sense?
Yep, totally. To clarify on my originally train of thought, I thought about one specific and enclosed, like one entire document with a beginning and an end. Let's say it's a research paper, or let's maybe take a novel or something that's easier as an example, maybe, and you can really zoom into the text and see it expand. For example, if we say that there's a protagonist who describes a travel, and then you see one sentence, I traveled to Greece. And then you zoom in a little bit, and then the person describes how they went to the airport and took a plane, and you zoom in a little bit more, and then you can tell how at the airport in the waiting line this happened, and so forth. And you zoom out again, and you skim a little bit to the landing, and you zoom in again. You know, that very interactive in and out where I need it.
That with that, it's going to sound derogatory. It most definitely isn't, but that sounds a little bit like outline writing. And I mean that in a positive way, in the sense of the process for how it's authored is, of course, important. So, for instance, I feel very much like you do. So when I wrote my thesis, there was a ton of headings because I wanted that feel to be able to go in and out. And then academics said, no. So I had to collapse it a lot. So I just wanted to highlight that authorships comes into it. But there was a little comment by Fabienne just now, which is why I had to run down the stairs. He was saying not just moving in and out like it's a static thing. So this is my stairwell. And here is a photograph of Fabienne helping Bent into virtual reality for the first time. So I just filmed this because for me, first of all, it's only 5x7, this photograph. So it's not very big, but it's very high resolution. So I can stare at it and every single dot is amazing, right? This is important. But when I then pull out, you see there's a lot of them, right? And I'm highlighting this because even though it is completely static and analog, the fact that you can zoom in is an amazing emotional thing. You know, this is not even text, but it is a zoomable interface, as it were. You know, when I walk up and down, I will focus on different things. And if this was an XR thing, each one of these would be enterable, probably, right? Mark, please.
Yeah, I find this interesting. I mean, one thing that I sort of do notice is that outside a deliberate piece of work, like, you know, in a sense like an artistic work, filling out all these levels is an absolute labor, which could have two problems. Is one, we don't necessarily have good tools for doing this. For instance, something to tell you, you know, what have you missed out? You know, are you actually constructing this sort of page you want? And just there is a massive amount to do. And this sort of bleeds over almost when you think about metadata, and it's the same problem arises that I find that the conversation eventually peters out because some people begin to figure that somebody else has to do all this extra work if they don't do it, and somebody else doesn't tend to turn up for work very often. So there is a challenge which doesn't argue against the idea at all, but there is a genuine challenge in just how do you actually efficiently and effectively sort of resource this idea and actually sort of sit within that sort of writing process. This is how I doesn't devalue it at all. I think I find it tremendously interesting. I think the challenge at the moment is that it's a very much actually analog thing. You almost have to construct it and write the whole thing yourself without any affordances to help you. So, you know, it's a nod to the fact that, again, our writing tools need to develop.
Our writing tools are developing.
Yes, they are, Frode.
Obviously more, but no, I just wanted to say, we talked about glossaries earlier, and I think glossaries are super, super important. It was really Doug Engelbart who helped me relax into the notion of what a glossary could be. So, for instance, Mark, you talked about stretch text, which is really great to bring up. So let's say I'm reading this and I don't know who Mark Bernstein is. So I select the text and I do a Command F, a find command, because I'm hoping somewhere in the document someone will introduce him. So I get all the occurrences of Mark Bernstein, which includes timeline and all that good stuff. But here on the top, this is the glossary entry for Mark Bernstein. And what would be nice with stretch text is to be able to have a reading mode where when you come across something, it can automatically, in brackets or whatever, have the glossary definition. An example for me on the power of glossary is I took the car down to Southampton where I met my advisor to talk about my thesis, and I hung out with Mark. Each one of those words could have a glossary term. That's a biography of me. Went down to university, that would be University of Southampton, etc. So instead of having to write many, many levels, to commit to a system, many, many aspects of your work, which can then be automatically expanded upon with need, I think is quite powerful. And of course, we have this mechanism too. If you click on an endnote, it comes up right there. So that's a stretch text without stretching the text, because PDF you can't really mess with. So the idea of being able to dig in and go out is really, really important. So by showing these examples, I am not saying it's done. I'm saying this is the very, very snowflake on top of the iceberg. It's a huge topic, and just on another thing, it's funny. I was going to add this to the book today in some sort of an article. It's really brief. I'll just give you the highlights, and that is moving into XR space will give us more space, and one of the functions of that is it'll give us more space to make a mess of, right? So yes, there are interactions we can do there that we haven't been able to do, but we need to be even more careful with how we do our housekeeping, so to speak. So the idea of hiding, selecting, and connecting becomes even more important. So this is something I think we can practice on traditional screens because it helps us with our, I don't know, I can't think of a better word, seriousness. For instance, when you have a knowledge map or some kind of a map, the fact that you can have more of it in itself is not necessarily good. This is where what Michael is talking about. You've got to be able to have an effective zoomable thing. You also need to have two other things. An effective way to hide stuff. Hiding, I would say, is as important as showing stuff. And when you hide, it has to be in a manner where you can instantly bring it back. So selection then becomes a really, really important issue because you have to communicate to the system what you want to hide and what you want to bring forward. And then the final issue in this particular thing is how you want to connect. How do you want to show a link that opens up another collection of this stuff? I know it's a visual thing primarily, but visually things can be really strong if it's an underline or whatever. So I think just developing the visual language for all these Spider-Man nets we will be able to deal with will become important. And then, of course, finally, and maybe most importantly, we need to be able to make sure this can go between different systems. I, of course, want to use visual meta to retain this into whatever environments. And in the closing of the book that I'm working on now, where I'm saying that humanity, through our entire history, we've never had a choice of who we wanted to become. When we went out of the water onto land, no choice. When we started walking using tools, no choice. When we started using technology, no choice. When we started printing, no choice. However, now that we're moving into XR, we do actually have a choice because we are a different species. The electronic means we have through which we communicate can potentially actually allow us to define who we want to be when we move into these spaces. So that's why it's so amazing for me to listen to you guys and all the different ways of how we can think and be. It doesn't just have to be what evolution through capitalism gives us. Sorry, that turned into a long rant. Leon, please bring some sense back.
Well, and to add to that, with visual meta, you're basically not sort of, well, you're leaving it open to the reader to figure out what is interesting, where to sort of zoom into, where not to zoom into. And this is something I was also thinking about. I will quickly show it. You were talking about hiding, sometimes hiding things, and let me quickly share my screen here. So in XR, I was busy with the following thing. It's basically a sort of XR lens. So basically, we're standing here and we can look down, but right now we don't know what it is. And I was playing with this concept of lenses, or sort of, well, it's not really a portal. It's not that you go into it, but it's more like an informational lens, which doesn't really clutter up the design, because the more text, the more it becomes a mess, to get back to your point, basically, Frode. And this is really great, but I also realized that I'm starting to, now I have this superpower of hiding stuff, but I also now have maybe the same problem which a normal book writer has. And yeah, maybe I would be curious maybe to ask Rob, like when you would write a book or a story, or in my case, some kind of experience, like how do you set the criteria of what to sort of leave out or not be distinguishing between essential storytelling and maybe not so important details? How to separate these things along the creative process?
Can you
Oh,
unshare your
Frode.
screen first, please?
Wow, that's a huge question. I think you start with everything left out and you gradually start to put things in. And a lot of it is daydreaming. So it's hard to say that it's a conscious process anymore. I think initially I at least had to spend a lot of time thinking what's important and wasting a lot of time writing things that aren't important and then taking them out. But now it seems to me the process is selecting something to put in. And that's really just wool gathering, staring out the window.
Listening.
I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, definitely. So it's a lot of, so you take a lot of it out after reviewing it. You filter out a lot of stuff, or
I filter more stuff out now or take it out afterwards than I used to, because when you're starting to write, every one of your words is precious and you don't want to kill your babies, but eventually you have to cull the litter. So I think more and more of writing is editing. And that's a matter of holding in your head the details that you put in that are important for the mood, the development of the character, or the progression of the plot, and removing the things that are extraneous. But hopefully you get better at removing the things that are extraneous, except that as you get older and the memory starts to fail, you have to spend more time trying to remember what you were doing. Right, Bill?
Yes, and I'd like to say that's exactly the process. But I wouldn't say that the things that I would rather say that there are writings, passages, sentences, whole writings that just don't make the cut. If you're going to share the work as it takes its shape, then there's certain things that just they don't quite contribute to what feels like the whole thing. I have been using Tinderbox since it was called Series, before it was Tinderbox, and before that Storyspace, because it enabled me to write. I don't want to call them discrete, but you know, a bunch or a clutch, a handful of text, and just leave it there on the desktop. But even desktop isn't a good, really a good metaphor for this. Leave it lying around so that I could, and then because Tinderbox or Storyspace had a search feature, so that you could say, well, where was that thing that I was thinking? You think of the phrase, initiate a find, and then which presents a little window with a list of all the mentions of that particular thing, and then you can come up with it and either put it back in, reshape it, or put it back where it was, or someplace, or just throw it someplace else that's not in your way while you're working on the other things that actually work. I'm fascinated by this discussion because it deals, because our discussion for the most part today has dealt with what in a broadest sense we're calling would be considered the materiality of text, which is how you get at what the author was thinking at. What's the mechanism or the medium or whatever it is. And the fact is that while an author is creating a way for a reader to get at what the author is thinking or hearing or daydreaming about, as Rob says, the reader's daydreaming right along with the author, creating a completely, not completely different, but a related but quite different, for want of a better term, structure of ideas or thought, that the text is the kind of link between the two minds. And one of the things that I found the greatest challenge was to get the materiality of the text to not dominate that process of daydreaming on the reader's part. And so this requires an active imagination, not just in terms of communicating any idea, which is what text can do, but when you have texts in different, when you have a number of texts, this is one of the great things about hypertext, is it allows you to leave these things lying around so that the reader can go back through and make their own pattern of things, so that it makes it easier. Anyway, I don't know how coherent that was, but that's what I've been working with for many, many years.
I think I want to, can I add something to that?
I hope so.
Writing a book is creating an imaginary world in your head and then creating the sequence of events so that they produce a dramatic effect, and composing it all so that the reader follows the play that you've created. And their dynamic response, interior response, is affiliated with all of their knowledge and experience and understanding of what you're doing. So the dynamics of literary response, in Norman Holland's phrase, is a very important part of the process of literary exchange. When you add the idea that you can link pieces of text to different pieces of text, then you have to think about a whole new architecture of the way in which the story would unfold, and how some things might stop you and some things might point you in a different direction, and the ways in which that kind of navigation, it's an enormously more complex mental structure for a writer to do this. And I'm thinking that possibly, well, it's already happening. My daughter wrote an essay about a computer game called Control, which was a Finnish project in building a world, a crowdsourced world. So they built this world with lots of people contributing to it. And then this company took that world and made this game in which you had to explore this world and clean it up, in effect. And that's an enormous project with a lot of people involved. And I think maybe as text becomes more exchangeable among people, this kind of creativity is going to happen more and more. So, everything is a group project now. It's impossible for a single person to control everything. Bill's done the most complex job I've imagined so far. I wouldn't want to try that now.
Right.
So I see, just briefly, Alan has joined us and Adam's been here, but we haven't seen your face. Hi, Adam. Dini has a comment, and I got a comment, and then Fabian has something entirely new.
I don't want to jump over Fabian. Did you want to say something on this?
No. He's coming with something new. So if you have something on this, that's absolutely perfect.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. So my mentor and close friend, Margie Lusenbrink, who goes by the pen name MD Coverly, died in October, and her memorial was last week. I've been her archivist and her documentarian for the last 7 years. And so she's been sending me her archives during her lifetime, But when she died, she left a lot of things on her server and in her computer and her materials at home that I have not had access to. And so her sons have reached out to me and gave me access to her server site. I'm flying to Newport Beach to get her access to her computers and to her files that are left in the garage. But that's just a background. Going through her second great novel, Egypt, the Going Forth by Day, I've had access now, because of the server site, to all the versions that she had produced over the last 20 years of that novel. And it's been really interesting to see. This goes back to what you put in and what you take out. And what she put in and what she added, what she added, what she took out, and for the final version. But not just words, folks. It's design, like where she put the words on the screen, how she laid out the secondary narrative. These were decisions she made over time as she grasped the affordances of the spaces that she was working in and the technologies. She built this work in Director. So if anyone knows Adobe or Macromedia Director, knows that that's now dead tech. At the time, though, it was one of the coolest frigging software programs we could use to make interactive media. And so she was just grappling with what she could do in this environment, realizing she can make a vertical text along with a horizontal text with text here, and they can come in and out at different times depending on where you put your cursor and what you clicked on. And so the timing becomes very part of the work, how the lines move up the screen. So that even things like lines on the page as they moved across the page, either up or down or this, horizontally, how that timed with the words and the music that comes in and the pace of the music and the pacing of the reader as they worked on this space. It's just phenomenal, the things that we can talk about in terms of how authors produce their text, right? So much depends on what they're using for their environments and the tools, being able to know the tools well enough to know what they can do with them and master those tools. Anyway, I'll stop there. Thank you.
That was great, Deanie, and that comes really well between Fabian and me. So going back to Leon's presentation there with the lens, we've been watching way too much Harry Potter in this household. Edgar is just that age. I don't approve of much of it, but the tool use, why can we not have magic wands in XR? Right? We need tools to different things. And the idea of the filter, we've had filter in different ways, but XR filters, I mean, imagine like Fabian's memory arm where you can put things. Imagine if on the other hand, you literally have different lenses to take out. So look, these are so fertile ideas. And Leon, can you please write up a little bit, so I put it in the book, of what you showed today? It would be so nice in the future to refer to it. Yeah, you don't have any choice, so there's no need not moving ahead. And then I just wanted to, I think also it was Bill who said, hypertext can make work for the reader they shouldn't have to do. If you write too much and if you don't edit, it can be a mess. So, I agree with that. And also, final comment before we go over to Fabian is that writing and authoring are not the same thing. You use the word writers today, which is in the language annoying because you're both actually authors, but of course we use the term writer as well. In terms of designing systems, the most important thing is how well something is written. There's no question about that. But we also need to consider at times writings by people who are not authors or just kind of scribble things down. So the act of reading and the act of writing from a tool and systems perspective is so different. It's obvious, I just needed to put it in there. And now Fabian is going to talk about his new glasses.
Hopefully I'm going to also show, so I'm going again the usual, trying to share my screen. Voila. Let me know if you can see it, please.
Yeah, can.
Okay. So I'll put on the side. So it's split in two eyes, but also each eye in four different screens. And I'll show you the lenses, why they were like this. You can see my hands there moving, I hope.
Yeah.
Very weird.
So I can move them a bit closer, like with an array, and further, and go back. So it's using hand tracking, but with a dedicated sensor. So basically, as you can see, it's quite fast and quite reliable. Not perfect, but like you can't really intertwine, but it's quite precise. Why? And then it's the usual, like 6 degrees of freedom. It's color pass-through, and
Hang on.
it's pretty good. Yeah.
Fabian, you haven't told people what you're showing. You have to start with you're burying the lead.
So the most important aspect is not the technical specification.
Oh, but hang on, you're showing a new headset. This is the Lynx headset, right?
Exactly.
Yes. Okay. So let's so we all know we're looking at some French product here.
Indeed, French product, and there is no account. So that's also specifically for Peter, but for a lot of other people here who don't want a Meta account or an Apple one or whatever, or a Google one, or so you don't have an account. You don't need to register to anything. You just buy the thing. You don't need to plug it to a computer. I just plug it there to do the mirroring, but it's all standalone. It's all in there. The sensors and the battery. It's based on Android. And also for the technically minded people, you can root it. So it means you can install whatever you want on it. You don't need to use a store. You can if you want to. But if you want to use an APK and you need, like, I don't know, containers or something a bit more advanced, that works on it. And they plan to open source a lot more of the tools. They announced it before, and they already started to put on GitHub. So in terms of privacy and tinkering, I would argue it's the best available headset out there today that you can buy. In terms of performance, it's good. In terms of software, it's not there yet. So the hardware is good, the privacy and the tinkerability is good. In terms of software, if you want to buy something and play, let's say a Christmas gift, this is not it. If you want to just, let's say, consume, it's not a device for consumers yet. It might become, and they might like iron all the kinks, but yes, you need to be able to fight a little bit with the devices. And again, in terms of tinkerability, that also means, unlike Meta, that the sensors, you have access to it, and you have access to the cameras. So for example, if you want to do some object detection or QR code or even read text, like do some OCR or handwritten recognition, you see the document on the table, and then you apply whatever filters you want on it. You can also do this, which is not possible with the evil one, let's say, to make it short. So I'm pretty excited by it. There is, again, like a long way to go before being just like, oh, pop it on your head and use a thing. The biggest problem for me right now is because I just do WebXR, and the browser right now doesn't do hand tracking. It will in a couple of weeks or months, and I might even try to do it myself, but it's not my expertise. But if there is no other choice, and because it's open, I might try like to make a workshop on how to build the browser itself. So then you can add more things like a sensor from light data from your house. The temperature now, it's too hot. I want like a fake virtual ice to cool down a bit. I could with this tinker and add it. So yeah, I think I recommend it for tinkerers or people who are for privacy reasons do not want or cannot have a Meta account. I think it's a great thing.
Thank you.
Do you want to drop a link in the sidebar, the chat, for people?
Yes, I'll put it. So the routing process, and then the official. Yes, which also makes me. It's not subsidized like Meta by your own private data. So it means it's not $400 or so. It's like 1,000, 1,200. I forgot. So it is quite more expensive. But I think it's it's a good trade-off. I think it is worth it basically. And then plus this one already exists, so who cares? We want something different.
So I'm going to talk to Leon now, but I mean all of you, what I'm saying. So this is what Fabian wrote in a tweet that he allowed me to put in, just this highlighted text here. There were two links, well, one to code and then the tweet itself. He did today give me this extra bit of text. So Leon, if you want to do something similar for what you showed us, this is all we need. This is an absolutely useful article. And so anyone else as well, if you have something that you think will fit the book, and obviously you have very little time, just please don't overthink it.
Okay, I will do it, not because I'm scared of you, but because it's easy.
That sounds like the greatest T-shirt ever. That's very good. Alan, welcome. You are here. That's good. We've been talking about zoomable text. We've been talking about this new headset and the authorship process. And so the book is coming out in a week. So if you want to change anything you have submitted, you can by tomorrow, because we're going to share the book. If you have anything additional you want to add, I think that would be good. I'm writing a piece myself that is, sorry, I just want to, the beginning actually says reflections, perhaps ramblings on where we are now, blah, 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 right? I almost wanted to say, because I'm the editor, I can do this, I can put this nonsense in here. But I really would like to encourage you to do the same, all of you, for all the editions of the book. You know, if you just want to literally put a post-it note in the book, so to speak. I had a thought today on this with your name. I don't think you understand how valuable that is. You know, it doesn't have to be an entire long article. So much of what you say here is just amazing. So that was my weekly rant. Over to Fabian.
Yes, I have two things I'd like to show. One is a bit more technical, but I think it's valuable. So it's, let me know when you can see my screen, please.
Not yet. Nope, sorry.
No. So I'll try again, but sharing the whole screen. Maybe that's the issue. Let me know if you can see something.
No, sorry.
Maybe I have a quota of sharing once per meeting.
No comments.
I hope not.
Bon, okay. Well, then it will be a teaser for next time. That's okay.
Oh,
so nothing.
Now we can see us in your screen.
Okay, and now you can see the rest.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So yeah, I have a presentation for a specific audience, which I can't really mention, but if you remember a bit my place of work, you can imagine. I'm trying to explain basically that immersive virtual worlds are just like a chat or 2D or 3D games. It's not such a big deal. We call them metaverse or immersive virtual world, but not such a big deal. In order to do this, I made this little website where I can make a little chat like this in 2D. And then what you saw on the left, I'll do it again, but you saw the message happening between the two peers. So if I hover here, you can see my name and the name of the other person. So that's just in 2D, as in text rather. Then in 2D, where I have those little persona moving around. Probably going to be too slow for you to see, but they're moving around a bit. And from there, I can
Did we lose him? Oops.
We've
Is
broken
that frozen
Fabian.
for anyone else or just me?
It's on. I mean,
Only his hand remains.
That's a
there's
bit
nothing-
yeah, spooky. Alan, I typed the answer to your question. Fabian works for the European Parliament.
I'm really disappointed to hear that because I was hoping that he worked for Harry Potter.
I have such problems with Harry Potter. One of them is normalizing of slavery. How is that cool? Dobby is a bad house slave. Dobby should beat himself up because Dobby did a bad thing. Oh, look at these. Oh, there's so many things in there that are just.
Okay, but here's my problem is that Hermione's the one that led the revolt, and Harry Potter gets all the kudos for it.
I think you just ruined the story for me. Just kidding.
Leon, you're sending all these cool notes, but you're sending them only to me. Change it to everyone.
Maybe he doesn't want to.
Oh yeah, they are a bit intimate actually. Yeah, no, the Harry Potter thing, oh, God, there's so much to disentangle there. I mean, London now is owned by Harry Potter. You walk down any street in central London, there's a magic shop. They're just all over now. And the things you can buy in there, if we were children again, oh my God, we spent all our pocket money there. There's so many things. It's just that also the whole private school and all these things is entirely referred to as Harry Potter. It's not referred to in any other kind of cultural way. It's very, very odd. Anyway, we're waiting for Fabian to re-emerge into the semi-real world.
So I would note that actually having sort of Peter Boyce, the bit that I always found unrealistic about Hogwarts is how good the food is.
Yeah, that's not very realistic for school. Come say hi. Come say hi. Where's that guy? Oh, okay. Look. Where did
I don't know if I should move this or not, but in my hi.
Hi.
Good to see you.
Hello.
In my program, there's 6 faculty, and each one of us represent a house that are teachers. So like there's a house of barber, house of lures. And the students that are in their house are specializing the area of the faculty. So lures is the videographer, AI, doing AI video. So anyone that's interested in that is under his domain. We've been doing this for years, and so it's been fun. Students really like the idea that they're in a house. Of course, the houses take place in Slack, so it's a Slack house, a Slack channel. So it's been interesting.
So I have to ask, who's the dark arts then?
Yeah, well, that's definitely up for grabs. In my lab, I'm the only Gryffindor. And I have 3 Slytherins in there. It just makes me so mad. And nobody else wants to be a Gryffindor. So anyway, I'm alone.
One thing that I think historians will look back on this time is how we've had all kind, Lord of the Rings and all of these things. We've had fantasy kind of stuff before, but Harry Potter becoming so popular now, I think it helps the next generation to become more aware of what XR can be.
I'm going to interrupt for a second. What it makes it hard when I teach digital storytelling, all they want to write about are magical things, princesses, castles, wizards, vampires, and I have to put in my syllabus what they can't write about so I can get them to write about something else. No werewolves, no zombies.
Yeah, but yeah, Dini, I absolutely I understand that and feel that. However, XR is Harry Potter land. It is fantasy. It is magical. So to on another level, to release that level of thinking of this can become this and that can happen here is, I think it's going to be really interesting how that feeds into whether we are going to own XR world or whether it's purely going to be products by big companies.
Peter, I let them write about spaceships all they want. And planetary beings. I just don't want to see another damn zombie.
Please.
Hear it. We have enough zombies in the United States as it is. We don't need to keep recreating them.
No comment.
Kind of unrelated, well, totally unrelated. I've been showing my wife, or we've been watching West Wing, which I grew up on. And yeah, and it's really a special feeling that there should be a French word for when you're watching the show and like literally nothing has changed in 20 years. The same issues. And it's like, it's just this feeling of, man, maybe Fukuyama was right. We're at the end of history and nothing has substantially changed or moved forward. But I'm sure there's obviously a bias, all sorts of bias going on. But yeah, it's interesting. So that reminded me of the zombies, how that's been I thought that was going to be a fad that went out with like vampires, but even vampires lasted way longer, and then zombies have just had a dominance for 20 years.
I just saw Stop Making Sense, a big screen, this touring the United States right now. And I think of David Byrne, same as it ever was, same as it ever was, that's like the mantra in my head. It's like, and I'm just, I'm going to see Judy Chicago's dinner party and the new Judy Chicago, her story at the New Museum in December. And I went back through my archive of Ms. Magazine, which I've been collecting since 1970, by the way. And I have like a full collection in here in my office. I pulled out the 1979 edition where they were talking about dinner party, and reading through that article, realizing we haven't made any progress at all. And I'm still screaming about the same things I was screaming about when I was in my 20s. And I think I don't want to die like this. I want things to get a little better. I mean, it is somewhat, but it's not a whole lot.
Deja vu all over again.
At least I can be a college professor, which was not allowable in the 70s, right? But it doesn't mean that listen to me.
Well,
go ahead. Sorry.
There is something different. And this is, okay, so the article that I'm trying to shoehorn into the book, which probably won't make it, is called Of Kings and God. And it's the one that starts out with, we did not have much choice in becoming. When our great ancestors moved from ocean to land, as I mentioned earlier, that whole thing. But now it's different, right? Now we really can choose potentially who we are. And the first mention of king is King Charles II is said to have described St. Paul's Cathedral as awful and artificial. And that's a cute quote because the words have changed. It meant awe-inspiring and full of art. So we now have to choose, as we're building this cathedral of XR, do we want it to be awful and artificial in the old sense or in the new sense? So that was just a fun little thing. And then I have a little thing on God where, I'm not particularly religious, but it does get people's attention. I say God is not a narcissist. God doesn't really care what kind of attention you pay to God. If there is a God, God would care about how we care about God's creation. So that was that. But then when I go through this thing, we now actually have a choice. We need to ask ourselves whether when we slap headsets on our cranium, we're going to block out views of the world or to amplify our understanding of it, right? Look at us. We're sitting using Zoom. We have so many connective technologies. And if we manage to grow different communities, not just our community, but like in the Doug Engelbart style networked improvement communities, we can actually, for once, be the ones who say, this is what it's going to be like. I'm not sure we will, but isn't it an amazing thing that theoretically, I mean, look at the internet. We all know the story that was just graduate students making the original ARPANET, right? The adults weren't in the room. We happen to be generally older people now, but there aren't any bosses of this. So this Future of Text book will be marketed much more than the previous ones. And whether Dini and I get our grant or not, there will be a lot more screaming for these issues over the next couple of months to a year. Because imagine 10 years in the future looking back at this, the potential we have now is absolutely vast. It really is. And I mean, just look at the things that were shown today, like, Leon's lens and, Michael's discussion and zooming stuff. It's so crucial. And I'm sorry for doing this rant every couple of weeks, or maybe even every week, because, you know, I'm trying to get a PDF into my headset so I can read it and put it down on the table so I can annotate it. That actually right now is really hard to do, and that blows my mind that that's absurd. So I really hope we can get together and provide the infrastructure so Fabian and Leon particularly, who have been showing stuff, can go further. Yeah, Fabian.
I don't know if I want to share my screen anymore. That didn't end well. But I'm going to try. I'm not well. I'll just quickly go back to the previous point with the network visualization, because I do think it's important. And I had a tiny thing that I still want to show that's going to be quick. Yeah. And then yeah, why I want you to show something a bit crazier is because I got a call earlier today to again give another workshop to kids, so around 11, 12 years old. And I told the friend I was working with today that I love to give them workshops. I think it's helpful to them. I hope so. But it's definitely helpful to me because they are amazing beta tester. They go there fearless. They don't care about preconception. Oh, shouldn't do this, shouldn't do that. And they're also sometimes painfully frank or honest, like, well, this is terrible. Okay, well, that hurts a bit, but okay. So in terms of having some, honest feedback and without like a huge layer of fear, preconception, etc. I love this as an audience, was as a way to collaborate. So I'm pretty hyped by it. So I'm going to try. Let's see. Let me know if you can see the screen, please.
And do lots of words and things.
Yeah. Super. So that's the same page as before. I'm not going to show you the 3D view. You'll just have to trust me that it works. What I did not show is the replay part. So I can record an interaction where people send me each other messages, and I can play it back. I can go back in time, and the green tick mark here is somebody who joined the network or the immersive virtual world, and then send a message. And then the red bar at the end is somebody leaving. This person is alone now. So I can scrub, go anywhere, any point in time. And I wanted to highlight this in the sense of behind all those headsets and immersive virtual and whatnot, it is the same infrastructure. It is the network we use for Zoom, for chats, for sending emails and whatever, just to like demystify a little bit how it works. And now what I'm going to show the kid next week, I hope, is this. So it's the same virtual environment I use, the scaffolding, the console, etc. Then I got the modeler to do a little penguin for a theme, and then they can take those are going to be fishes, and you can pick them with hand tracking and drop them on the plate. And if you do the right thing, the penguin is going to say yes. And I think if you fail, voila, move to the side. So different animations based on what you do. And yes, I'm super excited to see them play with that, to see a little bit how they're going to. So the goal here is to teach math, or rather to play with a topic that is usually difficult because of the abstraction, and to make them a bit more, I don't want to say tangible, but interactive and virtually graspable, and eventually like do the number line and a lot of the things we already do in school, but with instant feedback. For example, if you do pick a certain number of fish, you can see the number of fish on the plate, or whatever the scaffolding will be pedagogically relevant. So yeah, that was the progress of today with a little fish in animation, or penguin rather in animation. But the goal there behind is to, why do I show the two things one after the other? It's the same principle of making visible the invisible. So the network, when you have a social interaction in VR or XR or whatever, it is there, but you don't see it. You don't see the packet flowing through the wires. or the Wi-Fi with the packets going through your router. But that's what's happening on the infrastructure basically. And I think once it removes all the magic, you don't actually can fix anything, but you can try. You're one, let's say, bit literally closer to it. So yeah, I'm going to try to do this, but for math, basically, for young kids through XR. So that was the little link between the two experiences.
Thank you.
Hi, Brandel.
Howdy. My apologies for being late. I was up too late reading immersively. I finished 7 hypertext in headset and started reading Mixed Harvest. It was a very interesting experience.
So jealous. Yeah, getting access to the headset, Brandel, here in Europe is not easy. Fabian tried, and I don't even have the right credentials to try. Plus, I'll be gone that one day. But no, that's cool. We've been talking about a lot of things, Brandel, but the last thing that Fabian just showed us now, one of the things is being able to go backwards and forward in time. And this conversation today is using Zoom's new proper transcription. So of course, I'm going to put it into some sort of AI and all of that good stuff. But I've been doing my usual rant, so I'll do 10 seconds for you. We can, for the first time, Michael, enable, right. I do believe that humans potentially can build XR, not just have it foisted upon them like all other evolutions. That's my summary. If you want more, watch the video, sorry. But one of the very pertinent points here is we need to figure out timelines easily to share that. I mean, it should absolutely be super easy just to slap this conversation into a proper timeline that we can all use. What is available for that? What's the way we should do it? We have a timeline in the book, many pages of history, but it's just a year and things. I'm sure that's extractable, but let's say Fabian wanted to share the timeline he just did for an experience with someone. What is the best standard?
It's really interesting, yeah. So what you're saying is literally building, you're not talking about like a schedule of release. You're talking about literally building a timeline, not building on a timeline.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that imagine one of us has developed a timeline app, even on a normal computer, right? And another person has something on a timeline. We should be able to open that and it just automatically slots into place. That's what I mean.
Yeah. We do have calendars. We don't use them like timelines, but it could be possible to try to crib from the concept of an iCal into that mode.
That's very clever. Very clever. Please continue.
The scale of I mean, they're not thought of in the same way right now. So there's not a reasonable way of understanding that the constitutive parts of what is understood to be calendar class information sort of makes it into being timeline class. It would be difficult to see the forest for the trees at this point. You know, if I go back to my calendar year of 2016, it's every bit as busy as my calendar year this coming week. But the detail in there isn't sort of such that it would be legible without some level of summary. So there's that. Obviously, I've made a timeline with the Wikipedia VR timeline that existed in two dimensions prior to that, but it's bespoke specifically to the things that are sort of available and visible in Wikipedia, and it's limited to a 1-year cadence in order to make sure that it has enough reasonable information for the things on the scale that are understood there. Go ahead.
So then my question for you, Brandel, could you help within a short period of time to help write what iCal is to a minimal point where it's useful so that I can add it to visual meta so that the timeline in our book can easily be extracted by any one of you as a timeline into your calendar, should you wish to do such a silly thing. Because iCal, just like we have Leon here using the URL for the entire world, why not use iCal for the entire time? That's very interesting.
Yeah, yeah. So are you talking about building iCals for Gutenberg and 1450 and stuff, or are you?
Yeah, the last 13 billion years worth.
Uh-huh. Interesting. I might have to talk to the calendar folks about what they think about that. But certainly in principle, the as long as those numerical data are managed, we may end up with the next epoch problem. You know, I don't know if you've ever heard, but time, as we understand it for many systems, ends in 2038, and similarly, the ability to the number of milliseconds since the 1st of January 1970, measured as a 16-bit float or something like that, some frame like that. But all issues of numerical resolution, similar to the Y2K bug, will always obtain as long as we have finite resolution, which we, to my knowledge, always will. It's just a matter of how far we can care to kick the can down the road.
Yes, and in our really basic timeline for the future of text, we have 13 billion years ago. It's a sentence. And there's a huge amount of fuzziness around that, obviously, as well. So one of the things that Chris Gutteridge and Mark Anderson and I have talked about a lot in the early days in Southampton was multiple addressing for the same thing. So maybe we should look at time the same way. So with addressing, it would be a URL plus citation plus maybe a specific thing. So it could be many ways to find a piece of text. So maybe we can work around the idea of more fuzzy human time as well, as long as there's a convention, as long as it's close to good enough. If AI can parse these things now, as long as we're clear. So for instance, in our timeline, we have circa CA a year, and then we have this year till this year. But of course, at some point, we would like to have this explicit microsecond, and that should be scalable, right?
Yeah, I can certainly help dig up the format and try to gather. It looks very simple, just from I've never opened one before, but it looks pretty manageable. I don't know if there are any stipulations about the valid understood data ranges, but it's funny to me.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, that's really cool. Thanks, Brandel. Mark and Fabian.
Just very quickly, a couple of things sort of as we're back on timelines, and I just to observe is, I mean, it's interesting, the metadata aspect, because what is the date we're talking about? Is it the observer's frame of reference, the thing being observed, or possibly the thing that's being talked about that's observing something at a different time? We cope with this remarkably well. All I'm saying is, I mean, it's a thing to aim to encompass, not necessarily in the initial instance, but it's something we need to allow for. Another thing is we cope with the fuzziness of time. So first the Earth cooled, and then nothing much happened for many millions of years, and we don't mind that we don't have to see in accurate scale all that time when nothing happened. We quite happily elide these gaps, which software by and large struggles with. And that's no canard against the people programming. It's part of the limitation. It's quite a hard-edged thing, the binary certainties of coding something, and that's I think an interesting challenge in this as well, because as we found, when you're doing the original timeline for volume 2, whatever it was, it turns out the information gets really lumpy really fast, and that never makes for a nice presentation. But I think every time I've worked with temporal data, I've never, apart from someone who'd made a completely bogus test set of data, ever seen a nicely distributed set of temporal data.
I think when it comes to time, it is very, very easy to argue ourselves into infinity. You know, first, what is this? The paradox of you can't get there because first you have to get halfway there. That's the similar kind of discussions we can have. Your problems are completely correct, Mark, practically, but even more than that. The notion of time is almost by definition a lack of granularity, because time changes absolutely everywhere on every scale. So every single thing, every interaction in the universe has its own time scale. Hold someone in the rocket ship or at the top of the mountain, like Bill is on right now, has a different time, but that's only on a gross level. So this is an inherent physical aspect of reality, and that's really interesting and important. However, we as humans, we can, and this is where I feel like I'm kind of chewing something really heavy, because we can define stuff. I go back to the TCP, IP, Vint, and all those guys. They just decided it's going to be like this, and it wasn't. It worked. For instance, we're talking about granularity. There's nothing wrong with having May 17th, blah, blah, blah. And then the end user can specify when there is a day, I want the softness to be 10% of the time, or whatever it might be. But have that as an option. So you have an encoding, you do your best, and then you have a decoding, whatever you prefer. But I think this is too important an issue to say is too difficult. Sorry, Fabian, please.
Going to share my screen again.
Oh my God. Good luck, everyone.
Very quickly. So let's see. Yeah, I'll just, this you've already seen, everyone, but not Brandel. So it was a bit of a, let me know if you can see it.
No.
Still,
yeah.
still on the black.
Okay. And I'll share everything. That's okay. And now?
No.
No?
Still,
Well,
just it says Fabian Bennett has started screen sharing, but we're not saying anything beyond that.
while he's showing that, I'm showing this.
Well,
Super
well,
recommended book, not very big, and it addresses the whole time issue. I'm just going to show you a single image. This is the reality of time. It's messy.
Yeah. I read it, Frode.
Oh, like it?
Yeah, very much. And I got an email from a friend who's writing a book, and she said she just wrote a chapter based on it.
Oh, excellent.
Excellent, excellent.
It's everywhere.
Oh, we have.
So-
Okay.
Well, Fabian, are you going to speak to the?
I'm going to screen share, and I'm sharing.
yeah,
Fabian's and Fabian speaks. How's that?
Yeah, sure, yeah, that works. Thanks. No, yeah, I of course I understand the discussion. I of course cut through all this philosophical stuff with a prototypist mindset, which is how I would do it. So if you go back, yeah, that's the timeline. You can define it visually like this. I've done a little editor before, so you have a WebXR scene, and then you can move elements around, because those elements on the timeline can be moved, and thus you can manage design animations this way. I don't, this one is not, so it's an image, but you can imagine grabbing an object and then moving it, and then the animation will have a certain duration. You can have one before the other, etc. And if you go down in the example, yeah, that's the data format. That's it's not a standard thing. It's a basic JSON, some ID that you generate, what's the content, when it starts and ends, and you can have different format for this. Here it's days, but it can be milliseconds, can be years. You can have duration, no duration, etc. So to answer the question is, I would take a document, let's say a 3-page random document, feed it to an LLM, and then ask it to output the JSON with that format and display it. That's how I would generate, let's say, such a timeline. Will it work? I don't know. I think it would be a quite interesting attempt at it. Would it be useful? I also don't know. I do find it interesting. Like overall, the little demo I showed earlier about going back in time and scrubbing through a recorded set of network events, it's kind of mind-bending when you have to tinker with time, like actively making the software that makes you go back or record, go backward, change the speed also. I didn't show it, but you can replay the event, the timeline at normal speed or faster and slower. So you can expand it. I do think as an experience, again, I enjoyed it. I lost a couple of hairs pulling them out of my head, but it's a nice kind of struggle. Let's say it's fun struggle.
Yeah, that's really funny. I love seeing the timeline like that and knowing that a tool like that exists. It does make me remember that internally, we have a much more elaborate view of timelines like that is really rich and really pretty, multicolored and multiple semantic sort of functions. It's for animation timelines, of course. So if you look at things like Adobe After Effects and any other system like that, even Blender, which I understand that some people are trying to learn, then they have need for time. And in fact, I'm going to talk to the fellow who builds the animation timeline. It's the thing that's responsible for all of Apple.com, about whether it could be used simply to represent time. But of course, also you mentioned, Fabian, like one of the benefits that you get from that is that you can scrub a timeline, and then you can sort of recompose and act as though that you're you can interpose something that simply hadn't occurred to me when I've seen static timelines in paper or on books in the past, is that you could imagine yourself here and understand that this means that this is 10 years that way and this is 20 years that way, kind of thing. Fascinating in terms of having digital timeline and all of that entails as a thing that you can kind of use in order to recompose context from a particular moment, from an encoded past. And the other thing that I wanted to say that I actually raised my hand for initially was to Mark's point about the limitations of encoding, and just to say that like the limitations are always with the encoding of meaning, not of the digital system doing the encoding per se. It's always an imagination gap of what is appropriate to do with the encoding. But one of the exciting things about digital computation of representation is that it gives rise to obligations to consider the gaps that exist there. So we talked about how we'll happily align the 6 billion years between the very beginning of the universe and the first inklings of anything meaningful happening with Earth. But one of the exciting things about computational representation, especially one that has linear stuff, is that at some level or other, it still obliges us to account for it. And I find that to be exciting because it means that when you sort of align things in a way that seems narratively, logically sensible to be able to kind of sequence in that way, and you say, okay, but what about this 10 years versus that 20? And it just forces one to think about, either is there an alternate representation than this great stonking gap, or do I have some kind of footnote that indicates that there's a discontinuity in the scale here? I don't know. I think there's something really special about being held account to some of the other inherent flexibilities, and that representational rigidity of being forced to decide where the flexibilities are is actually a really refreshing thing to be required. That's all.
Yeah, because one of the first things I actually when I tinker around with Noda, which was my first sort of tinker with anything in admittedly an app, because I didn't know how to build the stuff myself, was wanting to think of time as perhaps the third dimension in the space. So I could actually look at something that appeared to be a composed whole, but I could basically look at it from a different angle and see, oh right, so there is they sit at a different time, and that doesn't have to imply any causality. It's just literally the fact that these were not at the same time, which otherwise a sort of two-dimensional presentation can give. So that's one thing that actually rather excites me about XR from a sort of knowledge investigation perspective, is the ability to make much more use of the temporal axis in whatever way we see fit, especially or just being able to resort, having a space and resorting it in and out, say, of a temporal line, and then maybe go back to something else. Anyway, I just dropped that thought in there.
So,
yeah. That was one of the things I really wanted to do yesterday as I was playing with the 7 hypertext. Is I really wanted to be able to walk around like a pillar or a ball of all of the different forms in order to have, you know, space to stand, and for my standing and my slow perusal to be sort of the mechanism by which I sort of navigated that stuff. I've done that in WebXR before. It's on CodePen, but it doesn't work in WebXR. If you put it up somewhere so you can see it, and it's fascinating just to be able to kind of to be able to use that as the mechanism, which we naturally use to slowly progress through a meaty idea. Yeah, so I think that there's going to be a lot there, what we can imbue with meaning based on what we already do when we undertake those actions.
That's a really good reflection, mate, because I should apologise because Brandon's talking about a paper which I wrote this year, which is sort of echo between the two of us, but it was effectively a bit of a recitative about the history of hypertext and the different ways in which it's gone. But what's really interesting, I've sort of taken that as a note to self to think about timeline, because the stuff I'm doing with the folks over at Minter and sort of trying to think about academic publishing in a basically just in a non-monolithic publishing sense is what more you can do with the information. So for instance, one thing is, yes, well, why not have a timeline? It might not be everything. The point is, I mean, there's still this sort of the authorial sort of choice as to what makes a sensible timeline for the reader. I mean, you can give them all the information, it's metadata, but probably you don't want to dump all the data on top of someone because it's invariably messy and it's probably too much. But you might be able to give them enough, even in a two-dimensional manifestation. I mean, anything to help the reader, because in the end of the day, particularly with articles like that, what you're trying to do is you basically are trying to bootstrap someone else very quickly through information they really don't need to waste time getting because someone's already done that.
Yeah, when it comes to
statement to the obvious.
When it comes to someone already done that, time, many people have done that. So Peter put this in the chat, which is just color bars, which is really absolutely worthwhile thinking about, different ways of doing it. We can here see, this is obviously mostly for the recording, what Brandel has done 4 years ago on a timeline. And then I wanted to show you our book. So the timeline here is really, really simple. It is a year and then the thing by so-and-so, the thing by so-and-so. That's the general format. But even here you have interactivity because you can do the find command. And here you can easily see all the occurrences of OCR scanning, which is something Mark was talking about earlier. So why in the world can I not, in Visual Meta or some other method, say these pages contain time-based information using this logic, and then have that be thrown into what Brandel has here? That should be entirely doable, just like a 3D file or a picture file or something else, right? Isn't that one of our things that we aspire to?
Yeah, and it's to the point of sort of representationalism. It's always and only ever limited to the brokerage of the representations as they exist. So coming up with the protocols, the formalisms of what this date is, and what that system of transposing and representing dates needs, is easy. But yeah, so to that end, it would be eminently possible to consume whatever format you have in the book as a way of being able to represent it in timeline VR, which could be fun. If there are parallel tracks or ways in which those can be encoded lengthwise as well as through that chronological thing, then all the better for being able to kind of understand the contemporaneity or the parallelism of events and things like that. So if there's a particular lens that we can apply to that conceptually, then we can take a look at whether we can apply that with enough technical rigor to make that come through as a representation and play with it. So yeah, that'll be fun to play with.
That's interesting the way you're framing it, because on desktop computers, we have word processing, we have number crunching. We don't actually have a standardized thing called a timeline application. It doesn't exist. We have geography and things, but not, you wouldn't, nobody would say, hang on, that's interesting. Let me just open my timeline. All we have is the calendar. That's the closest, which becomes a diary once the day passes, right? So maybe, Brandel, what we can do with, especially what you have already done, create a timeline app / WebXR for XR and just populate it and make it useful. The only way a standard becomes a standard is if it's used, obviously.
There's I like the timeline calendar questions. I think there's a ton of unexplored territory there. Adam and I have talked about it some. It's wild how trapped we are into the calendar mode, right? It's like the way we're trapped into documents in some ways, but the structure of a calendar makes a lot of sense when you're just trying to keep track of what day it is, right? But if you get to a place where you're using a calendar for what it should never have been used for, which is like to keep track of everything that you're doing over the course of the day, it becomes really interesting, right? Like, I'll give you, if you don't mind, an example. I'm doing like a couple things right now, right, at once, and where do those things fall on, on the calendar as an event? And perhaps I close some subroutines, finish cleaning the studio, take Belle on a walk, and then while I'm walking, because that's such an automatic thing to do, I start thinking about other things. Well, that opens up other subroutines. And is that an event, or is that a thing that you track as to say, like, at this time, I was sort of thinking about this, and then that subroutine never really finished. It just sort of bled into other things and sort of maybe went into the background, or got diaphanous and confused with other ideas. A representation of the days, the moments, to the days, to the weeks, that could sort of highlight where your mind was, or what subroutines you were working on, or perhaps it's based on how much energy expenditure is involved, would be so fascinating, in the same way of not even a line, but I was thinking how much I would like to just have a phone app or a watch app, let's say a phone app to make it easier, where my entire life was represented as rings, like a tree, and I knew that the outside would be somewhere, right? And I could see where I was in the moment, and then I could ask questions and see sort of like points light up or areas come into focus throughout my entire life, going from the outer ring to the inner, where I'm at, and how wild that would be, even if I couldn't view that idea or that moment right then. If I could just say, hey AI, send it to my laptop for me to look at later, to look at these results later, that would just be wonderful. Anyway,
that's not in any way, that's a very important way. And this is where I get happy and very, very frustrated. To me, going through writing stuff for the book and trying to design the reader software, so much of it comes down to metadata. Because I define metadata as data which says what other data is. So Alan, your example there has obviously at least two dimensions. One of them is time, the other one is place, where you had the thought that could be useful later. So if we just develop the means through which you can put that stuff somewhere, and that is open for your other pieces to read, the kind of stuff you're talking about can happen. But if you don't have the means through which to capture it in a way that is parsable, it cannot happen. I know I'm saying something very, very obvious, and I'm preaching to the choir.
yeah,
Be aware of that. But if we as community don't actually do that, this cannot happen. Oh, Fabian, are you running away or rollerblading away? Be careful. See you
hey
later
Fabian.
when you have to
See
go.
you.
Bye,
The
time.
I
Take it.
definitely agree
Have a
with
good
that
week.
sentiment. But I think it, at least how I like to think about it, is from a conceptual level, from a protocol level, how are these things possible, and what are we missing, right? So a calendar is a protocol. It's a great example of that, and it works in all sorts of mediums, right? I think a lot of the things that we talk about in VR, unless we have a way to dimensionally reduce them, then it kind of, there's a question of how, what would be the lifespan of it? How useful could it be, right? Like JSON is an example of dimensional reduction and outlines, trees. Anyway, I'm talking too much as everybody's dropping off.
No, you're not. So we are going to run a little over time now for those who can be here. But so in part answer, Alan, because I'm very quote unquote angry now, in the sense that I really think we as humans interested in this can do this stuff, that kind of angry. That we can discuss forever why we can't do it, but that's a different discussion. So I just put in the title of the future of text as it is exported from author. So it has the name, and then it has in brackets my name, the author of this particular document, hyphen year, hyphen month, and then it's got all kinds of gobbledygook for the specific time, right? It's a specific normal time coding. It exists. And it's proven extremely useful for me because I have to go through the book and publish PDFs again and again and again just to make sure I don't have a hanging line break here or whatever, right? So this makes a unique document every time. Just adopting one of these standards and saying this is how a document, and I mean document in the wider sense, can communicate to software what it is. We are halfway there, don't you think?
Yeah. So my apologies for staring at my phone before. What I was doing was looking at a couple of other things, a couple of encroachments of semantic time as they've existed. They exist publicly within iOS these days. So for those who don't, religiously watch all of the updates, as of iOS 17, you can keep multiple timers in the timer app, and you can label them so that you can have one for the end of a speech, and you can have one for the end of a point, or you can have a sequence of timers if you want to build them up for the purposes of being able to compose a recipe, where you have 30 minutes for the flour to rise and 10 minutes for the icing to freeze, something like that. Another thing that has recently come about is Journal, which is a system that is able to crib from all of the different sort of internal, interior records, digital exhaust of your exercises, your heart rate, your photos, your location data, and allow you to compose something in order to do sense making of it. And I don't know whether it accesses calendar, but it would be interesting to think about, at what level can be done across those different things and reconcile the function of time on the scales of timers to time on the scales of iCal to what kind of sort of sense making can be done by bringing in or suggesting, providing nudges about what could be brought to bear from emails or from photos or from other aspects of that digital exhaust. But I guess one of the main things there was just that there are so many things that we have that deal with time but because they exist on these disparate time scales, we don't really account for the fact that they are functionally the same thing, despite sort of being deployed in such a different place. Even this Eon timeline is explicitly and seemingly exclusively about a project. It's Gantt charts as time rather than something more kind of meditative.
So I see hands, but just specifically for you, Brandel, I just wrote here, do you know what a clipping on the Mac with the time date information to drag in, is that something that could be relatively easy to find out? Because imagine if we could start doing that, just dragging these things about. We can unify time. I know it sounds very fancy, but I'm a fancy guy.
I'm not familiar with the terminology, but I can look it up and try to make more sense to the question.
Can you do it by tomorrow so I can put it as a very brief thing in our book, please? But no, I know I bug you a lot, but it's not just about making the book bigger. It's 500 pages. It doesn't need to be bigger. But it's also about if we decide to use something like this, it means in the future when we talk to people and say, look, it's in volume 4, page blah, blah. It is just, we can more easily address it than having it here. That's the thing. Yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
Leon, Rob, and then dinner, I think.
Yeah, I have a sort of a sidestep to this timeline talk. What I would like to see, Frode, and I hope you can get it done by next Monday and show it to us, is a timeline which tells me a story. Like what I usually find, I find timelines very impressive, but they also sort of make me feel lost a bit. Like I feel like, okay, now I have to search for something, or what should I search for? So as a sort of public tool, I it what I really like about a book is that you can sort of surf on the same surfboard of the author, and you don't have to be smart, but suddenly you feel like smart and you understand stuff as you go. And so there is a sort of story there. And with a calendar or some kind of super calendar, you sort of, you're alone on your surfboard and you have no idea where to go. So it would be interesting to see if there could be some kind of symbiosis between the iCal format and some kind of perhaps hand holding or suggestions, like, hey, maybe you want to go into this sort of category of events or this category of events. And so that's my feature request, and good luck.
Okay, well, I think that, I know you're saying it with a smile, but I do understand that it's a real smile, not a joke smile. Yeah, we can do this, and we should do this. I think that is really vital in the sense that it gives vitality to it. I just put a screenshot because it wouldn't allow me to do the full text, but I just dragged from the calendar onto the desktop, and it's got all kinds of things in here, right? We can just copy some of that. If Apple uses it, it's good. And there's absolutely a brilliant idea of adding life to it, of adding what is the point of this, right? It could be as simple as a title. It could also be links. It could be relationships. So who wants to meet again this week to nail down this single thing so we can put it in the book? The Future of Text Timeline Specification based on applestuff.com. Was up for Wednesday or Thursday, same time.
We could have a chat or a video call on Wednesday, and we could just write a sort of approach, possible approach. Maybe it's silly, but it's also good to have some silly ideas in the book as well, to show our vulnerability.
I think, yeah, I agree with that. Well, absolutely. But I also think, how amazing would it be if we managed to condense this type of thing down to a point where we can actually have a line or two of text in the book. You select it, you drag it to the desktop, you drag it to your calendar, and it actually goes into the calendar. So much of this is hidden. I'm a Mac guy. I want things to be graphical and all of that. But a lot of it, you surface it. Oh my God, you can do things. Text can do things. So yeah, Wednesday, is that what you said? Is Brandel nodding to that too?
I'll see. I have things this week. I'm catching up with somebody from my old role, and then on Thursday, all going well, I'm going to be presenting or talking to a class at Carnegie Mellon, which is exciting. So I will have to plan my time carefully, but Wednesday would be better for me.
Well, Wednesday would be the best for those who can make it. Okay.
I'm out, but yeah, I'd much rather people met on Wednesday using more time.
Okay. I think that for this level, Leon and I can do a lot because it's basic what we're talking about. But anybody who wants to join would be extremely welcome.
Feel free to send me an invite. I'm not sure at the moment that I can, but I am interested.
I can. I'm doing the calendar for that, for the whole package. So do you mind just putting it in your calendar by yourself? Because I just pulled across future text. Okay, thanks.
What time are you talking about?
Same time.
Wednesday?
Okay. So 8 o'clock,
Same
I think
time.
that's 12 o'clock for you, maybe, New Yorker guy.
Very good.
Yeah, I mean, it would be fun to write down, as Leon was saying, a kind of an approach and all of that, but then also doing one or maybe even two versions of it, putting it in on the page. And if they turn out to be ridiculous and people laugh on us, great if it spurs on something better. You know
Wonderful.
how people say the best way to get an answer on the internet is to say something that's blatantly wrong, right?
Right, I have to run. Great
Yeah,
seeing you
yeah.
all.
Yeah, the dinner commitments there too. Thank you for joining, Alan.
Thanks for
And
having me.
by the way, next Monday, book launch. You all better be there and be on time. Yeah.
Rob, you had your hand up before. Was there something that you were going to say, or?
Oh, sorry. Yes,
man.
please.
Well, I
Hi,
was just gonna
guys.
mention the Long Now project.
Yes.
Because they wanted to build a clock that would ring once a century or tick once a century and set off an alarm in 10,000 years. And I don't understand what the difference between a clock and a calendar is in that case.
Oh,
It seems to
none.
me a calendar is built into the social fabric and will last as long as it needs to, whereas building a mechanical clock that ticks once a century seems, well, frankly, dumb.
Well, I like the idea, and I think Jeff Bezos actually paid for it. I think it was something like $45 million. Not cheap. But I like the idea because it means I'm probably going to approach him through people to say, pay money for visual meta. We're also in it for the long term. In terms of the difference between a clock and a calendar, that is a really fun question. I would say the difference is that a calendar records, a clock doesn't. You know, so they're only
Yeah.
kind of semantic differences, but that's interesting in and of itself, right?
But it seems to
Yeah,
me
but
that
I would
they
also,
may be merging. That's what I'm.
Yeah, it makes sense.
yes. Yes, absolutely. I mean, I also think that the reality of a clock as something that has the ability to apply self-updates versus a calendar that tends to be something that one applies more alterations to is a relevant distinction. That a calendar itself doesn't automatically advance until you build technology to represent it in that way. And so it would have been possible for somebody to have a clock with a month hand or a day hand, but nobody bothered doing that because it was understood to be self-evident. But I think that there are some really interesting consequences of merging the two and understanding them as being.
I'm so glad you said that because I see the calendar year as a circle. Winter to me is on top. And I think the video is mirrored, but going in a clockwise direction, this is spring, and at the bottom is summer. And then we go up fall and winter again. So it is a circle. So I have mapped the year onto a circle. So thank you both for highlighting the very interesting mergings there.
Roger, your circle was going counterclockwise to me.
Yeah, yeah. Exactly.
Are you mirroring or not?
On that note, thank you for today. I look forward to seeing what will happen to this transcript. I look forward to seeing as many of you as can come on Wednesday, and you will all bloody well be here week Monday. Yes?
Yes.
Champagne glasses, all of you.
Indeed.
Mandatory. Bye.
Indeed.